everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you how to retry a process that has failed in PROCESIO. I got this question the other day from one of our community members, and I saw that this was really interesting. And make sure you pause this video in order for you to see what I'm doing and to try it yourself. And you can try it step by step, because I'm going to go through all the processes and I'm going to show you all the settings that I have done within those processes. So you will have all the information that you need to do it yourself. Also, I will provide you with the import files so that you can import the processes that I'm showing to you right now in your own PROCESIO workspace. Make sure you stay till the end, because we have some hidden gems in here. We will show you multiple things that you could do with PROCESIO, including how you can run a process via Call Subprocess, via Call API, and how you can run it synchronous or async. Cool, so let's get digging. Now, in order to simulate the process that sometimes is failing and that you need to retry, I've built this process. What this process does is quite straightforward. Basically, it gets the date, the UTC now date time, stores it in the now variable. Then from the now variable, I'm using the get minute action to get the minute of the current time. And then I'm taking a decision if to throw an error or not. So if the minute that I just got from here, if the minute equals minute when to fail, and this is an integer variable marked as input, so it's required when you run the process. So if those two variables are equal, then go to throw. Otherwise, go on the default branch and stop. In other ways, if the minute, if you run this process, and right now is my minute is 8, if I run this, I will get an error. Okay, so that's how I simulated the process that sometimes fail. You might have anything in this process, right? Because my time here was this one. If I run it again with the same parameters, but give it a different minute, it will run and go on the stop here, as it just did. So that's how I simulated the process that sometimes might fail. And you might have processes that sometimes might fail for different reasons. It doesn't matter. Even if you have processes where you intentionally make them fail for whatever reason with a particular error message, as it is in this case, then you might need to rerun that process depending on the error message that you gave. Regardless, it's your decision how you use this. Cool. So I have done the classic scenario where you use the Call Subprocess action to run that process. So as you can see here, I'm using the Call Subprocess action to run the process that sometimes fails, and I'm passing the minute when to fail variable, and I only have this variable. So let's run this process. My minute is 9. Okay, so sorry, it's 9, yes, but I'm going to run it so that it doesn't fail, to see how it acts when it's running correctly. Okay, so everything is good. Now let's run it again, and now with 9, because that's my minute at the moment, and the subprocess is failing, and because I'm using the Call Subprocess action, also my main process is failing, and that's the problem that our community member was trying to solve. Now, how do you do this? It's not as straightforward as you might expect, but it's very powerful, and this opens a lot of opportunities for you to use, and not necessarily with running a process in PROCESIO, but running a process in any other application. So I decided to showcase two approaches. Both approaches are relying on running a process via Call API, and for you to run a process using Call API, you will need to go to your workspace on the API key menu and generate an API key that you are going to use in order to launch a process in PROCESIO using the call API action. Now let's go back. So make sure you copy the key and the value of the API key, because you will need those in the process. Now, how this process looks like, I'm going to describe it step by step, and then going to go in a bit more details in the call API action so you can see how you can run a process. Cool, so what happens here, I have a join action, then I'm running the process in synchronous mode. I'm getting from the response of the running the process, I'm getting the status of the process, because it might run and end up in success or in error, and I need to know that. And then I'm using a decisional action to take a decision if the instance status is different than 50. 50 means it's a successful run, and the retry count is less or equal than 3. So basically we are going to try 4 times in this scenario. Then it's going to go to join 1, which is this one, and then we're going to increment the retry count because it makes sense in the scenario of our condition, right? If it is less or equal than 3, then you would need to, every time you try again, you will need to add 1 to the retry count. And then we're going to delay the process for 1 second and then go to join and run the process again. So that's the retry policy that I've implemented. Make sure you also see the video with the retry policy that I've done. It's on our YouTube channel. Now let's go a bit deeper in how do you run in sync the process in PROCESIO using Call API. So the way you do this is, first of all, you will need to define a credential. I've called this credential PROCESIO API, and the way I've configured this credential is quite straightforward. Is the HTTPS web API.procesio.app with no authentication. That's it. Don't worry if the status of the credential is not validated. It will not be validated because you need multiple information for the credential to work, like the API key and the API value associated to that key. Okay, so we're going to use this, and then the verb will be post, the endpoint method will be /API/projects, then it will be the process that we want to run, the ID of the process that we want to run, and /run. So this indicates to PROCESIO that you want to run this particular process. Okay, and this is actually a variable of type string marked as input, so you will parse this information to the process so that it knows what to run. Then on the query parameters, you have run synchronous is true, seconds time out, I've put 300. You can choose to not to add this parameter if you want to. On the headers, you will need to add the workspace ID, the key, and the value of the API. And those are also input parameters in my scenario. You can have them as a default value, or you could add, for example, the value of the API key. You can add it directly in the credential manager, and then you don't have to add this value to the Call API. I've chosen to add this value directly to the process just to showcase how you can do that. And then on the body, you have to insert this payload. It's a JSON which looks like this. The only thing that you need to change dependent on the process that you're running is the payload. And those are the input variables of the process that you are running. Just remember, the process that sometimes fails has only one input, which is this one, minute when to fail, and that's why you have the input variable in the payload here, right? And that's how you parse the input variables when you run a process via Call API. And that's about it. That's what you need to configure to run the process in sync. The thing that you need to remember is this one, run synchronous true. So that's how you make the process run in sync. And then on the output, we're going to store the status on the status variable and the output of the body in the sync process output JSON variable. And that's about it. That's all the variables that we have here. The retry count we've set to 1, so it starts with 1, and then on the first retry it will be 2, on the second retry it will be 3, and then on the fourth retry will be 4, and then it will go on the default branch. And that's how it's how this process looks like. So let's save it. I haven't done any changes, and then let's run it. Minute when to fail, I will configure this later. So I have all this information here. This is the workspace ID. In order to get the workspace ID, you will have to go on your workspace in the dashboard, and this is the workspace ID. You can copy it from here directly, and then I will need the process ID that I want to run. And in this case, the process that I want to run is basically the process that sometimes fail, and this is where you have the process ID. You can copy it directly from here. Okay, process that I want to run, and then the API key and the API values. I will reset all this information for security purposes, obviously, but for now you have them here. Okay, and again, those are the ones that you get from the API key. Okay, so let's see. Let's have a successful run without errors. My minute at the moment is 17. So whatever other minute I give here, the process should run with no problems. And then I will run this process again, and in order to have an error. Okay, so let's see what happens. I get the status is 50, everything is fine, right? As you can see, the output of the process looks like this, which gives you the status of the process. 50, as I mentioned, is a successful run. Other statuses are not successful. And the variable, basically here you will have the list of, you will have all the variables from the output of the process that you have run. This is how it looks like. Try it with output parameters as well, so you see how it goes. Okay, so now let's run this process again, and for the moment my my minute is 18, and let's run the process with 18. Let's see what happens. Okay, as you could see, oh sorry. So meanwhile my process was the minute changed, so I will run the process again with minute 19, and now it should fail. Let's see what's happening. As you can see here, the status is not 50 anymore, and that's why the retry policy kicked in, and it tries multiple times. Already the retry count is 4, so it's tried 4 times, apparently with no success. So if I run it again, it's still 19. Hopefully I will catch it. It will give an error. Let's see. So it already tried 2 times, and now 4 times again. So it is too fast. Let's run it again. Oh no. I'm going to increase the delay to 15 seconds, and that's how, sorry, I will put it 20, and that's how for sure I will catch a successful run as well. Now my minute is 22. I will run it. Cool. So the second retry already executed. the status is still 40, my minute is still 22, and let's see, I will for sure be able to have a successful execution because now the minute is 23. So let's see what's happening. Remember, the previous status of the execution was 40, so it was not a successful execution. And now we have a successful execution. Retry count is 3, so it tried once more, and now the status is 50, and then it exited the retry policy loop. Cool. So let's see what happened on the process that failed side. You will be able to see multiple instances that I have just launched. Those are the failed tries that I've made, and this is my last successful run. This is how it looks like. Cool. So I've showed you how to run the process with Call Subprocess, how to run the process in sync, and now how about if you need to run a process asynchronous? How about if you have to run the process asynchronous multiple times? So the only thing that changes when I launch the process using Call API is the fact that run synchronous now is false. So what happens if I change this parameter? Instead of the process answering with this is going to give me the instance ID of the process, right? And I'm going to store this in this variable async executed instance JSON, from which I'm extracting the instance ID. I'm adding the list instance ID to the instance to monitor list, which is a list of strings. And then I've implemented a process that is waiting for all the instances to finish and is going to test those instances maximum 10 times in this case. And then I'm also passing the process ID that I need to monitor, the workspace, and the key and the value of the API keys. And then I'm getting back from this process the list of instances that are still running, right? You can change these parameters, you can play around with it, and I'm going to show you this process as well. After this, I'm getting the instance status for a particular instance. In this case, the async instance ID that I've just launched, and I got it from here. Okay, so I'm getting the status of that process, of that process instance, and then again the retry policy implemented. It's basically the same conditions. I have the instance status, retry count. I'm adding one more retry. Let's also change the delay here so we don't have to test multiple times. Save it and let's run it. I will run it from a recent process execution that I've done. So I should be here. Let's run it. I already have all the parameters. Minutes to fail. My minute is 26 at the moment. Let's run the process and see what's happening. Cool. So as you will see here, the answer of launching a process instance using the Call API, using the async run method, returns me the instance ID that has just been launched. And again, I add it to a list, then I'm adding it to I'm running the wait all. So potentially you have here multiple instances that you want to wait for them to finish, right? That's what it does. And as you could see here, it's already done. Now let me explain this a bit. What's happening is, first of all, I'm mapping a JSON out to JSON with the default output of the scripting action, of the JSON scripting action, which looks like this. And then I'm iterating through all the instances that through all the instances to monitor, and then for each of the instance ID, I'm getting the instance status, where I'm using the API method API projects instances instance ID status, and then on the query parameters I have flow template ID with the process ID that I've parsed. On the headers I have all the authentication information, nothing on the body, and I get the instance status from here, which looks like this. Okay, and I have the status here. Okay, so then I extract the instance status from that information, which is instance.status. I store this in the instance status, and then I'm doing some JavaScript coding in order to only keep in the list only the instances that are still running, right? So if the instance status equals 30, then it is I'm pushing this in the instance list. So 30 means it is still running, right? So this is why I'm checking for instance status 30, and then I'm extracting all the information from the JSON out JSON, which is basically the output of the JavaScript action. As you can see here, this is a very interesting approach that I've done here. So basically the output of the JSON of the JavaScript action, output JSON, I'm also using it as an input, right? And basically that's why I'm doing the init of the JSON out variable, because I'm using it as an input and as an output at the same time. And keep in mind, I'm in a for each loop, and that's why I'm also using it on the input on the output as well. If you think a bit about this approach, you will see that basically what I've done here is to have the JSON JavaScript out JSON output fill in with all the information from all the iterations in the for each. Hopefully it makes sense what I've just explained here. If not, make sure you comment and I will try to make a video for that as well. Cool. So again, now I'm extracting all the instances to monitor from the JavaScript output JSON variable, and then test if I need to do this one more time. So if the instances to monitor is not empty and the retry number is greater than 0, then I'm going to go, sorry, I will go here. It's easier here. So, okay, so I will go to delay, and then I'm going to wait for 1 second, and then I'm going to deduct 1 from the max retry number. Okay, so that's why I'm using this condition, max retry number more than greater than 0. Okay, so basically it's going to wait for all the instances to finish, right? Wait 1 second and try once more for maximum max retry n. Hopefully I've managed to explain it okay. And then the last step that we're doing is mapping the instances still running with the values of the instances to monitor, and we're outputting the instances still running. As you might remember here, we have those outputted on this process. So we're getting the instances still running. Okay, so let's see, we have a retry count of 2, which means the first execution failed and then the second execution was successful, and indeed we have the instance status, which is 50. Cool. Hopefully I was coherent enough for you to follow through. Make sure you pause this video, make sure you go back and forth to see all the settings that I've done. Again, I will share the files, the import files that you can import in your PROCESIO workspace so you can test it yourself. And with the explanations that I've done, hopefully it will be enough for you to go from here and adjust those processes to your own particular needs. Now, the only thing remaining that I haven't explained is the get instance status process. That is, again, is really straightforward. It's just a call API action that is calling. It's a get action, get verb that is calling the API project's instances and the instance ID status, and it's storing the output in the instance details JSON. Right, again, on the headers are the API key and value and the workspace ID, nothing on the body. And then using the JSON mapper action, I'm extracting the instance status and outputting the instance status variable. That's it. So I could have done that directly in the process. I chose to do it as a standalone process so that you can reuse it whenever you have need for that. Hopefully this was useful for you, and looking forward for your comments and for your feedbacks. And if you have anything else that you want me to do a video of, please reach out and I will do my best to do a video about the things that you want me to show you to you. Have a good one.